Okay, so in this lecture we're going to discuss the main assignment for the autumn term, which is MiniProject 1. So I'm going to go over the project, what I'm expecting from you with the project, the submission procedure, how I'm going to assess it, and to make it really clear what exactly I'm expecting, I'm going to go through a few examples with you as well. Okay, so here we go. So it's an individual project worth 20% of the overall mark. I'm going to mark it out of 100, scale that mark down to 20, mark between 0 and 20, and the deadline's got two deadlines. One is the project proposal, which I'm going to talk about, and then the final submission is the end of week 11. So the exact dates and the full spec, everything I'm saying here is in a full spec, which is in on the course website. There'll be a folder for MiniProject 1, which will have the the link to submit the project proposal and the final submission. And it'll also have a full description with all the assessment criteria. So what MiniProject 1 is, it's a website, and it has a front end of the website. That front end uses JavaScript with Ajax to talk to a servlet, and the servlet talks to the cloud to pull some data, and there's data stored in the cloud, and that data in the cloud is pulled from a third-party website or web service. So the idea here is this is like a little mini small-scale replica of an internet scale application, in particular like a commercial website, which I'm going to talk about in a later lecture. So technology here, we've got HTML, CSS, that's for the front end of the website. Then we've got JavaScript, that's you can use it for nice pretty sort of bells and whistles on the website, but the main purpose is to use Ajax to send XML HTTP requests to the servlet and to receive the response back and use that to update the HTML. Then we got a bit of Java programming, so we're going to write a Java servlet. This is part of Java Enterprise Edition. You're going to write your own little web service, and then you're going to use Java to do a bit of web scraping and accessing of third-party web services, storing and accessing data in the cloud, essentially. And then we're going to do cloud data storage using Amazon S3. So people have asked me, in the first year I taught this course, can we use Dreamweaver to do this project? The short answer is you can, but I strongly recommend that you don't. You're welcome to produce a gloriously beautiful website using Dreamweaver, but you may have some problems with that. The main problem you're going to have is that Dreamweaver and all of these, what you see is what you get editors, they don't make very attractive HTML code typically. They do lots of kind of weird, crufty things that are kind of difficult to understand. And so the actual HTML you're going to get out of Dreamweaver is actually going to be quite complicated. And that matters because the key part of this project is not producing a beautiful front-end website. It's not a website project. It's a back-end website project, okay? So, at some point, you're going to have to actually edit, manipulate, interact with the HTML that's generated by Dreamweaver. And that's going to be quite challenging if you spent ages producing a front end in Dreamweaver. So I strongly recommend that you don't use Dreamweaver, that you just start nice and simple, work in NetBeans. But if you're really desperate to use Dreamweaver, or at the end of the project you decide, maybe I can make it all look very attractive using Dreamweaver, you're welcome to try, but you might end up wrecking your HTML if you do use Dreamweaver. But I can give you a little bit of help with that if you're desperate to use Dreamweaver, but I wouldn't recommend it. So what I recommend instead is that you start really simple. You start with a minimum functionality, you get everything working on a really simple example. I'm going to give you some really simple examples later in this talk, and then you can scale up. Then you can make it more attractive, you can add some images, you can add a bit of jQuery or whatever to make nice drop-down menus and all this kind of stuff if you want to. The other thing I'll say on the Dreamweaver thing is that there's like 5 marks available for making it look pretty. So don't waste lots of time on making it look pretty because it's not the right place if you want to get a good mark on this project. There's no space in this assignment for faking it. Okay, I'm going to look at your code. I'm going to see a demo of your project. So I'm going to ask you questions about how the code works. So there's no point in storing stuff in variables in a servlet and claiming that you're using the cloud, because it'll be very obvious whether you are or not using technologies for which I'm giving marks. Okay. 10 marks are available for the quality of your code. So it's very important that you it's important that you comment and understand your code anyway, right? I mean, this is like a 30 or 30 undergraduates. You know, if you go into the commercial world, then it's going to be expected that you have nice, tidy layout of code, so that because you know, the commercial world, it's not just you and your little project, right? It's like you and a team are working together to build that code. And if you produce something that looks like spaghetti, then your other team members aren't going to be able to understand and maintain it. And if you leave the organization, no one else is going to be able to understand and maintain it. So for lots of different reasons, it's also very important to, if you want to, for your own development, it's a way where you can write a short bit of code that's really messy and dirty, but writing a long, extended, more complex bit of code that's really messy and dirty, you know, soon you're just going to like not understand your own code, never mind other people's code. So it's essential that I can read your code, that you can read your code. So comment the important functionality, lay your code out tidily, use sensible variable names, use sensible file names, and as I said, part of the mark, 10% of the mark, I think, is for the quality of your code. As I said, don't worry about making a stunning website, okay? It's not a project in web design, it's a project in back-end web functionality. Don't worry about cross-browser functionality. You could mess around forever trying to make it work in Internet Explorer 5 or something. Just forget about that. Single version of a single browser, absolutely fine. Don't worry about clever mechanisms for updating the data in the cloud. This will be kind of a bit more obvious what I mean by that, but you know, you could like you know, have a sort of background process that updates the data in the cloud and stuff. Forget about it. Press the green button on NetBeans, that updates the data in the cloud, and then run your project in NetBeans. That's absolutely fine. Don't worry about deploying your project on a server either. No need to host it on some free hosting company. No extra marks for that. Don't waste your time on it. And don't worry about minor bugs, okay? And you know, there's third-party data involved here. There might be things that mess up your demo. You might decide to fix that bug just before the demo, and then totally wreck the code and have it not working in time. So since I'm going to look at your code, I'm going to read your project report. If you have a few minor bugs, I'll understand and you won't lose many marks for it. Don't panic about minor bugs, okay? Flexibility, if you want to, you know, if you're a Microsoft addict and you want to use Azure or something like that, different cloud service or Google Cloud, you're welcome, but you know, there's a limited amount of support I'm going to give you. I've gone to quite a lot of trouble making sure that the Amazon stuff works. If you want to use a different cloud provider, that's up to you, but don't expect too much support. If you want to do something a little bit different in some other way with this project, you can, but don't expect me to agree to you producing in PHP because you've got expertise in PHP. This is a project on enterprise scale stuff, and servlets are part of the enterprise Java package. So, you know, there's a limited amount of flexibility, but you need to talk to me first. Don't hand something in that misses the assessment criteria without discussing it with me beforehand. So, got lots of support for the mini project. We're going to have some peer feedback on your project proposals, as well as feedback from me. We're going to have lab sessions on all of the core technologies, so an HTML, JavaScript labs, we're going to have servlet labs, web scraping labs, data storage labs. So the plan is for the first half of the autumn term to be focused on, you know, getting you up to speed with the different kinds of technologies you're going to need for your project. And then the second half of the term, the lab sessions are going to be a staged progression where you sort of build the different parts of your mini projects with support from me and from your peers. So, you know, maybe in the first, after reading week, we'll have maybe the first lab session will be about producing a front end, then you'll add the JavaScript and the servlet, and then you'll add the cloud and the data and the web scraping and so on. I'm available in my office hours, I've explained. Better to email me for an appointment though. But bear in mind, you know, there's 22 hours of labs this term. Half of that you're going to be spending learning these technologies, and the other half working on your project. And, you know, 10 hours or whatever it is not enough time to produce, you know, a high-scoring project. Okay, you might be able to scrape something together quickly, but, you know, you've got to work on your own time as well, and that's what's expected that you do as part of this course, okay? Okay, submission procedure. So what do you have to submit? First, you've got the project proposal, which I'll talk about in a slide or two, which is 10% of the mark, short description of the project, end of week 6 deadline. As I said, the accurate deadlines, the exact, you know, to the second deadlines will be in the project description, which is on the course website. Then the final submission, 90% of the mark, code and project report, deadline end of this autumn term. There'll be links on the course website to submit it. If for some reason the website's down or whatever, I completely understand, you know, submit it to me by email and explain the problem that you've been having. So the project proposal, this is like end of week 6. So the aim of this is it's like a two-way interaction, right? So from my point of view, I want to see that, you know, you guys are up to speed, with your projects, that you've got something in mind, that you've got something to work on in the second half of the term, that you're not leaving it till 2 days before the deadline when it's going to be too late. So that's from my point of view, but from your point of view, it's important that you submit this project proposal, because then I can give you some feedback about your project, because I don't want you to take on a project that's way too complicated, has way too many data sources, or could be really difficult to get hold of the data for some reason. So ambitious projects are good, but you also need to have a project that's doable in the time available, okay? So the project proposal is designed so that you can tell me what your idea is, and I can give you some detailed feedback about that idea, so that you can produce a better project. So it's a sort of safety mechanism for you guys, as well as a way in which I can check that you're actually doing some work on the project. So I'm expecting a brief description of the project, the data sources, where you're going to get your third-party data, quick little diagram of the architecture, and a sketch of the website, or if you've already started working on it, maybe a screenshot of your first prototype. No problem about reusing any of this material in the final report, but I want you to produce it by the end of week 6, and that's 10% the mark. For the final submission, I need you to submit all the code. Don't worry about the jar files or third-party libraries, all this kind of stuff. I just need to see the source code. I'm not going to bother running it, but I'm going to look through it, give you marks for tidiness, and all the rest of that. Yeah, and I'll check the functionality and all that. Deadline of that ends at week 11. And then final reports is going to have like a brief description of the project, data sources, diagram architecture, screenshot of the website. The most important thing is please don't include screenshots of code or NetBeans, all right? First time I ran this course, people included, endless screenshots of, NetBeans, the command line, this and that. There's no marks for that, right? I'm only giving you marks for diagram architecture and a screenshot of the website. So, don't put in the screenshots of the code. Don't put in screenshots of NetBeans. Just keep it clean, nice, simple description of your website with what I've asked, with what I've asked for, i.e. the diagrams. Okay. Assessment. So, to assess this, I'm going to read the project report, I'm going to read the code, I'm going to view a short demonstration of the website during laboratory sessions after the submission date. So, over the Christmas holidays, I'm going to have a little look at your code and your project reports. And then in the first couple of weeks of term, in the spring term, during the lab sessions, I'm going to give you specific time slots. I'm going to come around, I'm going to look at a short demonstration of your project, ask you questions about the code, make sure that you're the person who wrote that code and you haven't copied it off anyone or anything like that. So you better be sure during the Viva that you understand what you're demonstrating. I'm going to mark a project out of 100, scale it down to a mark between 0 and 20, and this is worth 20% of the course mark, the mark for this module. So what I'm big on is using assessment criteria. So I'm going to use assessment criteria, which I'm going to explain to mark the project. If you want a good mark for your project, look at these assessment criteria, okay? I'm going to go through them now, but they're available in the project description on the course website. If you want to maximize your mark, look through the criteria, mark the project yourself, and then you can have an idea about what sort of mark you're going to get and how you can improve your project before you submit it. So these are the assessment criteria. Slightly inaccuracy there, but I'll make sure that's up to date in the description on the course website. So I'll go through these in a little detail. So I've talked about the project proposal, end of week 6, and these are, there's quite a detailed breakdown, brief description of the project, list of data sources, diagram and architecture, sketch your website, a screenshot of first prototype. So when you're submitting this, look at this list, make sure everything's on it, right? It's not a big deal. Then we've got the website. This is the front end. This is purely the CSS and the JavaScript, okay? So you've got 10 marks for the basic website, and then you've got 5 marks, for making it look pretty, adding some extra features, and so on. So as I said, this is not a project on website design. Make sure you spend most of your time working on the core functionality that's described in this assessment criteria. Don't waste lots of time producing a beautiful website. Then we've got Ajax. Ajax is a communication mechanism that uses JavaScript, and JavaScript can pull data from web services or other stuff, web pages, whatever. So we're going to use Ajax for this website, the front end, to talk to the servlet. And so there's 10 marks for implementing that functionality. Then the servlet itself, going to give you a talk on servlets in 1 or 2 lectures. And so, 10 marks for implementing one servlet, and if you've got multiple servlets, more complex data sources, this kind of stuff, then you can get an extra 5 marks for that. Then we've got the cloud data storage. So give you 10 marks for storing any old data in S3, Amazon S3. So this could be like user data, whatever you like. It doesn't really matter. And then there's 15 marks if that data, well, there's an extra 5 marks if that data is actually the third-party data. So I recommend that you use S3 to store and retrieve third-party data, and then you get the full 15 marks for that. And then we got 15 marks available for storing and retrieving third-party data. If you just do something really simple, like a currency exchange rate or a football score, then you can get 10 marks for that. If you use multiple data sources and more complex data processing, then I can give you an extra 5 marks for that. And as I said, 10 marks for code quality, 5 for the comments, 5 for organization. And then project report. So, briefly describe the project. As I said, it's actually 10 marks available for this, and I'll probably split that into 5 and 5, something like that. As I said, there's a typo there, which will be corrected in the final version of this. So as I said, 5 marks for attractiveness website. This is what the MiniProject's about, okay? All of this stuff. It's not a website project. I'm not big on giving extensions, particularly on the grounds of weak excuses. And the university in general prefers that we use this mechanism, deferral of assessment, rather than oh dear, I'm sorry sir, I lost my hat and I had to go and look for my hat all day, so I couldn't finish my project. These kind of weak excuses, right? I'm very unlikely to accept these kind of excuses. I might possibly listen to an excuse, maybe a day or two. If it sounds really convincing, maybe I'll give you a little bit of extra time. But in general, you've got 11 weeks to do this project. So a last-minute excuse like I couldn't do my project because of some minor issue in your life, I'm probably not going to give you an excuse, okay, any extensions. So I strongly recommend you work on this project throughout the term and that you hand it in on time. It's not a big ask, right? So contact me before the deadline if you run into problems. If you have difficulties and you some kind of legitimacy to the excuse, you might be able to get a couple of extra days if you contact me before the deadline. If you don't contact me and I haven't given you permission for late submission, I'm going to halve the marks every 24 hours after the deadline, and it's going to hit 0 after 1 week. So I'm going to stick to that pretty rigidly, and you just get no marks if you hand it in a week late. End of story. And this is all for, mediocre excuses, shall we say. If you have, on the other hand, right, if you have serious personal problems, maybe you're ill, or you have, I don't know, one of your family's ill, or someone close to you dies, something like that, then the university is more than happy to recognize that and acknowledge that. And they have this mechanism called a deferral of assessment, which enables you to submit work late and get extra time to work on things without any mark penalty at all. So all you have to do is complete the form here, you submit the form, you provide the documentary evidence. It's essential, it's something you can provide documentary evidence for, and then no problem at all. And I'm more than happy to help you, give you any advice about deferral of assessment. So the university prefers you to follow the deferral of assessment mechanism rather than come to me with, weak excuses or telling me about the problems you've been having. So if you need extra time and you've had legitimate personal issues and you can provide documentary evidence, then I strongly recommend you go this route and talk to me if you need any advice or help with that. So plagiarism, I'm sure you've been lectured about this, ad nauseum, but I'm going to mention it anyway. It's a serious academic offense, completely unacceptable. And so if you copy your mate's project and hand it in as your own work, I'm going to report both of you to the university, right? If you're found guilty, maybe you're going to have to redo the project. I'll give you a different project to do. Your marks could be capped, or you could fail the module, right? It's severe penalties. Just don't ever do it, okay? More information there. Now, this is the more tricky kind of plagiarism, where I strongly encourage you to work with each other to help to solve the problems, understand the technology, all this kind of stuff. People often work together and help each other solve problems, and then they go off and they apply those solutions in their own work in their own creative way. So I strongly encourage collaboration, okay? No problem with people collaborating, but what's not acceptable is when people collaborate on a single project, which they make a few minor changes to, and then submit as their own work, okay? That's not acceptable. So first year I taught this course, You had like, I think 4 students, they basically sat down together, they worked out a solution to MiniProject 1, and then they made a few minor tweaks, and then basically submitted the project as their own work. And it was blatantly obvious that they'd done this because there was a really stupid use of servlets, all the code was almost identical. It was obvious that they hadn't done this work individually, that it was like a group project that they submitted as an individual project. And that's what's not acceptable, okay? And I penalize them as I'll explain. So it's not acceptable to produce for a group to work on a project, an individual project that they submit as all of their individual projects, okay? I hope that's clear. So if you submit 2 people submit near identical projects, I'm going to divide the marks for the project between the projects. So so let's suppose 3 people hand in a project, I give that project 60%, but instead of giving each of the people getting 60%, they're going to get 20%, because what it's been is a group of people working together, producing a single project that they're submitting as their individual work. So I'm going to penalize that, I'm going to divide the mark between the number of people who've worked on it. I think that's fair. Only applies to the marks of the parts of the project that are identical. So if you submit different project reports about the same project, then I won't penalize you for the project reports, I'll penalize you for the identical project. And I will not police this, all right? I will not police any of this plagiarism stuff. So if you give your project to a mate and he submits it as his work, then both people are equally liable. I'm not going to I'm going to put lie detectors on people and see who produced the project and who copied off who. You're responsible for the security of your own work and for submitting that work, okay? If you give your project to someone else and they submit it, you're both equally liable, and I will not listen or have discussions about who copied who, okay? So you're responsible, and I'm not going to police this. Okay. Give some examples. Right, so to help you to understand what this project is all about, I'm going to now talk through a few examples, and I hope that'll make it clearer the sort of thing I'm expecting from you. The first example is a simple Manchester City fan website that displays up-to-date results from the team. And in this project, we've got the HTML, got the front end that displays the actual page. Then this page has this HTML has some JavaScript. This talks to the servlet, and the servlet picks up the score from the cloud. And a separate program scrapes the score off the website and stores it in the cloud. So this is just a simple sort of example of the sort of project that you could do for this mini project. So the first thing to think about is, well, what's the data? How am I going to get hold of the data? How am I going to what's the data management procedure? Because one half of the project, this bit, displays the data, and another part of the project gets the data and stores it in the cloud. So here we're going to have something like a website. Maybe there's like a BBC football website, or maybe there's a web service. There's like various football score web services. And we can write a program, as I'll explain later in this term, that can pull that score data and store it into that program. And then what this program can do is it can store that score data in the cloud. So this cloud now contains the up-to-date score data for a particular Manchester City, let's say. And then a separate part of your project, you're going to have the front-end website, and that's going to use JavaScript, XML, HTTP request to send a request to the servlet. The servlet's going to send a request for the score data to the cloud. Then the cloud's going to pass the score data back to the servlet and back to the website. And this is the same data that you stored in the cloud in the first part. So let's look at these little bits, these different parts of the project, just to explain how they all work in more detail. So as I said, we're going to go through in lab sessions all this technology in more detail. But let's say this is an example of the sort of very simple front-end website you could build to begin with. So here we have our Manchester City fan website, and we have, here's the location where the score is going to go, and you click on Update Score, and it sends an XML HTTP request up to the servlet, pulls the score back from the servlet, and displays it on the website here. So this would be the sort of HTML and JavaScript combination that you could, that's essentially what's displaying that here, what we're seeing there. And so it's a very simple bit of HTML, and then we've got a little bit of JavaScript that sends the Ajax request to the servlet. Then we've got the servlet. There's going to be a lecture on servlets, so don't worry too much about the details. But it's just a bit of Java that's run on a server that pulls the data from the cloud. Or during your debugging and testing phase, you could start by storing it as a file and then add the cloud storage later. And the servlet request, it'd be pretty simple, right? that you have this process request in the HTTP servlet, or it could be a do get or something like that. And then all it does is got this function get score from cloud, or initially from file, or even from a variable just to test it. And then you just write that out, and then that's sent back to the web page. And the score data itself, where's that going to come from? There's something you need to put in your project proposal, remember. It's either going to come from a website or a web service. Again, there'll be a lecture on all this stuff. It's a separate bit of code that extracts the score from a website or web services and stores it in the cloud. You could run it in your own machine. I'm not expecting anything fancy. Just run it in NetBeans, press play, and it'll pull the data from the website or web service and store it in the cloud. And then we've got to think about the data sources. Well, if I wanted to do a football website, then there's like a football data web service I found. I'll briefly talk about how you can do web scraping to pull the score from like the BBC Sport pages, something like that. Or do your own research, right? There's lots of websites, web services, all this kind of stuff out there. You can pull it from Twitter, for example. There's all kinds of things. So do some research, talk to me, we can have a discussion about it. And then if you want to get more marks, you could do more fancy stuff. You could add some more visuals. You could do some statistics. You could gather other data and integrate that, in order to get more marks for, more servlets, more rich data processing, and so on and so forth. Oh yeah, predictions, this kind of stuff, if you really want to get fancy. Okay, so now just to give another example, we've got the idea of this currency converter website. So the idea here is that the user enters an amount of currency, selects the currency that they want to convert it to, and then they submit it using JavaScript. The rates are stored in the cloud, and you can either convert it in the servlet or convert it using JavaScript. So here again we have our data. So in this case we're pulling currency rates into the program from a website or web service. We're storing the currency rates in the cloud. And then when we actually have the front-end website, we'll send a request. It could send a request that convert €3 to pounds to the servlet, and then that could send the response back. Or it could send a request for the score for the currency rates and then do the conversion on the website. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. And so the website could look like this. This is like, converts, something to pounds. This is like a pound currency conversion website, so maybe it needs to be made a bit clearer. So you enter an amount in pounds and select the currency you want to convert it to, click convert. And then it'll send it off, to the cloud and do the conversion either in the servlet or in the website. So this is, this is your 10 marks for your front end stuff, right? Nothing, doesn't have to be fancy. You add some more stuff, you get another 5 marks. And I found a nice web service that does all these currency conversion rates, and I'll say a little bit more about that in the talk on web scraping. And again, you could add some more things to this. You could compare the current rate for the last, you could, tell the user whether it was a good time or a bad time, convert the currency based on the rate for the last 20 days, say. Or you could do a sort of money supermarket type thing and look for the best rate across multiple websites. Very simple example. I mean, I do fly fishing, so if you certain weather conditions are good or bad for fly fishing, so you could enter the postcode. It would send that to the servlet, and the servlet would use weather data to predict whether it was good or bad for fly fishing. And this is some kind of super fancy idea, which could be a bit tricky to implement. Is you upload a barcode, so you have to somehow scan a barcode, and then you pull down. It would tell you whether this product, what the ingredients the product has, and whether you're going to die, or your sort of all the nasty diseases you're going to get by eating that particular brand of yogurt. That kind of idea, because of all the pernicious ingredients that it contains. That's the vague idea there. These are just ideas, right? So this is a fun project, right? You can find something that matches your own interests. Had some projects in the first year I ran this on guitars and music, or projects on games, computer games, projects on fitness, projects on football, cricket. Whatever drives you as an interest, you can choose as a project, right? And if you produce something that works well, then you can expand it in your own time later and make it into something. You could even make some money out of it. Who knows? Okay. So this is a summary, the sort of informal explanation. The full project description is available on the course website with the assessment criteria, with the exact deadlines. I encourage you to download that and use that as your reference for understanding what you've got to do for your mini project. And we'll go through this in a seminar as well, enable you to ask any questions. Okay, so in this lecture, we covered the first MiniProject. As I said, full details on the course website. And next lecture is going to talk about internet connections and protocols. So thank you.